Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, August the 8th, 2025. My apologies for the rather melodramatic thumbnail. Mars opposition Saturn. These two planets together are often connected with death, so, let's put a skull there, why not? But it's not going to be as bad as that, at least on an individual basis. We're going to have probably a relatively ordinary day. Probably nothing bad is going to happen. But still, Mars opposition Saturn, at least in theory, is a very difficult aspect. And yes, it is connected with death and destruction. And, already we're living in a dangerous world. We've got wars going on in various locations, because you've got the Middle East, you've got Ukraine. Sometimes we forget about East Africa. Is it Sudan? Some terrible things are going on in Sudan, but the media tends not to focus on that because other people are perhaps better able to publicize their plight. And so, Mars opposition Saturn is a noteworthy aspect. And, in this video, I want to look at the Mars-Saturn opposition in detail. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, August the 8th, 2025. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time on Friday, August the 8th. And really there's quite a lot going on. You can see that for a start we've got the moon moving into Aquarius. So London time, that happens at sort of 2:18 a.m. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon won't move into Aquarius until perhaps late morning, but it will get there. So we got moon in Aquarius, and the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. It's also making a grand trine. So moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. It's making a trine to Uranus. It's making a trine to Mars. And Mars is trine Pluto. In fact, we've got a grand trine anyway involving Mars, Uranus, and Pluto. So, that is, high energy. And, with the moon hitting that grand trine, then things might move quickly, and we might sort of be in contact with high-level energy, high-level disruptive energy potentially. You think about Mars, Uranus, Pluto together. You want to create change. Something wants to create change, and there is a certain sort of revolutionary element to that grand trine. And once things start, they can get out of control, fairly quickly. And we've got the moon setting it all off. And so the moon in Aquarius, moon is in a sign ruled by Saturn. So it's just come out of a sign ruled by Saturn, which was Capricorn. So maybe there's not a huge amount of difference between the two signs. Well, Capricorn represents the negative aspect of Saturn, whereas Aquarius is a more positive side of it. Saturn's Capricorn side perhaps wants to, keep things on the straight and narrow. Is quite sensible. Certainly wants to be in control, but it's not trying to bring anything new to the table. Whereas Moon in Aquarius, Saturn wants to be in control, but has ideas. And, it's not for nothing that Aquarius is, often associated with, totalitarian regimes. People have ideas. They believe that they are right. And as far as, some of the other aspects going on, we do, of course, have Mars opposition Saturn. Well, it depends where you are. Strictly speaking, Well, from a UK perspective, that Mars opposition Saturn is not until tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. And if you're not in the Americas, that Mars opposition Saturn is about Saturday rather than today, Friday. But we've still got the build up to this Mars-Saturn opposition, so I thought it would be a good idea to look at the Mars-Saturn opposition in detail today rather than leave it until the weekend. Besides, over the weekend, I think we've got a full moon coming up. So yeah, we've got a full moon, and that's what I want to look at in my next video. And we don't just have Mars opposition Saturn, we have Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, and we've got Mars trine Uranus. So we just had Sun semi-square Mars. So Sun, Mars, Saturn, they're all coming together. And we can see this on a 90-degree dial. So if we set up a 90-degree dial, just to show you what I mean. So remember, on a 90-degree dial, the conjunctions and oppositions and squares are showed as conjunctions. Semi-squares, sesquiquadrates are shown as oppositions. So looking at the 90-degree dial, there's Saturn, and there's Mars and Saturn together. There is a Mars opposition Saturn, so that's shown as a conjunction, and then that is then sort of opposition the Sun. So you can see how they're all connected. In fact, that's not a 90-degree dial; that's a 30-degree dial. So let me just switch to the 90-degree. That's clearer, isn't it? So there you can see Sun opposition the Mars-Saturn conjunction, because an opposition in a normal chart is a semi-square or a sesquiquadrate. So that shows you how powerful today is with the Sun, Mars, Saturn coming together, and it's potentially quite a troublesome influence. And you could say that you've got Mars opposition Saturn, you've got Sun triggering it, and so how do we understand this? Well, I'll be talking about it later in the video. It could be about anger, frustration, could be about death and destruction. And if you look at the Sun's midpoints, if you look at what midpoint the Sun is on, see, the Sun is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, it's on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, it's on the Aries-Mars midpoint, it's on the Aries-Saturn midpoint. So the Sun is on loads of midpoints, which are all quite difficult. And so maybe it wasn't such a hyperbolic thing to do to put a skull on the thumbnail, because the skull is just a significator of death. And yeah, Mars and Saturn is about death. It can be about death. And even if it's not about literal death, it's just a feeling that things are not moving, that things are so stuck that they're stagnating, that they're grinding to a halt, and we just could feel very frustrated. So that's one way in which this Mars-Saturn opposition could be working. But it can be very structured. It can be about hard work, getting things done, and having the discipline to be able to see something through to a successful conclusion. But it is through hard work. It's not really an especially lucky aspect, but it depends who you are, and we must always make a special effort to take advantage of things, and perhaps we can take advantage of a difficult situation, if we maintain our presence of mind. So that's the picture for New York. If we set the chart for New York, if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, so this is the chart for noon. So in Australasia at noon, the moon is approximately 0 degrees Capricorn. 0 degrees Aquarius. So if you are in Australasia or East Asia, the first part of the day, the moon might be in Capricorn, and the moon, last degrees of Capricorn, maybe not a great deal will be going on to begin with, and it's only when the moon moves into Aquarius, perhaps around lunchtime, or maybe late morning, no, more sort of lunchtime, late morning, maybe sort of New Zealand it could be early afternoon. So there could be a switch if you're in Australasia. As the moon moves into Aquarius, suddenly things start to happen, and you can see that there has been a real change. And turning to the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And so yesterday we had an aspect, a semi-square between the Earth and Neptune. That Earth-Neptune semi-square is starting to separate, so it's maybe not as strong as it used to be, but there's still the possibility of getting confused, of misunderstanding things. And then Mars is at 27 Libra, making a quincunx to Uranus, and so that quincunx between Mars and Uranus will be exact over the weekend. It's just now coming into orb, and so when you think about Mars quincunx Uranus, you might be thinking about wanting to assert oneself, wanting to show the world that we really can look after ourselves. And so it's a quincunx, so it can be a bit clumsy. We try to make an impact. We try to get people to notice us, but in the process, it may not necessarily come out in the right way. And then we have got a trine between Mercury and Jupiter, and this Mercury-Jupiter trine looks quite good. I mean, Mercury is obviously the planet of communication, and so if it's trine Jupiter, that might give us the idea that maybe we can actually say something useful. So if we've got something to say and it's of universal significance, then with Mercury trine Jupiter, maybe we can actually make an impact, and we don't have to try too hard, because and that might be an important point, because as I've already discussed, there are a lot of difficult aspects at the moment. Mars opposition Saturn, Sun sesquiquadrate Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, and it all seems like a lot of hard work. And if we're working on a material level, everything is difficult. But on a heliocentric level, on a more refined level, there is this Mercury trine Jupiter. So perhaps amidst the chaos and the drama, we can see something clearly, and it becomes obvious to us, with this heliocentric trine between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, not all of us may notice this Mercury trine Jupiter. Perhaps we'll be too busy worrying about other things, but if we can just give ourselves sort of moments of silence when we can just be alone with the universe, alone with the solar system, then that Mercury trine Jupiter might start to speak to us and might give the possibility of hope, and seeing how things actually could be better. And we shouldn't forget that on Monday we have got a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, and on paper that is a really good aspect on paper. But if we use it in the right way, especially as individuals, then we may be able to use it in a way that we can actually make progress with it, and may even be fortunate in the end. And so maybe that Mercury trine Jupiter is echoing the fact that that Venus and Jupiter are also coming together. So somewhere amongst the chaos, in the rubble, there's a path through, and good luck hasn't abandoned us. It's there. You just have to look for it in the right way, or maybe it will find you, provided you act in a way that is in accordance with who you are, and in accordance with whatever your fundamental destiny might be. So now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, August the 8th, 2025. Aries, it may not be an especially easy day, at least on the face of it, because Mars is starting to make an opposition to Saturn. And, this aspect between Mars and Saturn, it's exact this evening. If you're in the Americas, it'll be exact tomorrow if you're not. But I would have thought you can feel it. And this Mars-Saturn opposition, it's right across the main axis of your chart. You've got Mars in Libra, opposition Saturn, which is in Aries, which is in your sign. And it may say something about you and other people, how other people occur to you. And not everyone is going to be supportive. And it could be that you feel that someone is really frustrating you. I just seen 3 raccoons crossing the road, 3 of them. That's quite a lot, and it's in sort of broad daylight. Anyway, I don't know whether that means anything. I'm just pointing it out, just showing you what I'm seeing out of my window. And so, Mars opposition Saturn is potentially difficult, and it could undermine relationships. You and other people may not necessarily get on with each other. And part of a problem might be that you're still getting used to Mars in Libra. Mars has just gone into Libra. It's in your opposite sign, and with Mars moving through Libra, you do have to make some effort to accommodate other people. I mean, you don't have to give everything away. You don't have to compromise yourself, but you have to accept that other people have needs. They have peculiarities, and if you ignore them and you just assume that everything is going to be fine, you're going to be able to do things your way without any opposition, you might be mistaken. So don't take things for granted. But at the same time, Mars and Saturn are not entirely at war with one another. It might appear that they're at war with one another. William Lilly, he said about the opposition and squares, he said that William Lilly, I think he said that a square represents perfect enmity and an opposition represents perfect hatred. So that would be an exaggerated view of Mars opposition Saturn. You hating other people. Some people really, really annoy you to the point of hatred, maybe. But Mars and Saturn do have a certain relationship to one another because Saturn is in the sign of Mars. Mars is in Libra, which is in Libra. Libra is the exaltation of Saturn. So somewhere there is a sympathy between Mars and Saturn. And so even if someone really is annoying you, or perhaps you're annoying them, there is, amongst it all, a way of making a connection. You may not be friends with this person, but there is a contact that is possible, and perhaps you need to find it, and you can do your best. And one of the great things about Aries as a sign is that things happen very quickly. Aries can get very annoyed very quickly, but it's often just a passing storm, and Arians very often can forgive and forget. Things move on. Arians, when they're working on best form, they don't dwell, they don't linger, they don't have epic grudges. And so, whatever's happened in the past, Aries, there may be a way of getting round it and finding somehow some common ground between you and another person. And perhaps all it requires is just for you to make some effort to just understand. And that might be enough. And also we shouldn't forget that the moon is now out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, and with the moon in Aquarius, your social abilities aren't too bad. And this is especially the case if you can just be objective. you don't take things personally, and you know, treat other people, on their own merits. Particularly, your friends, and if they say something that you don't approve of, just let them say it. It doesn't really matter. And through socializing, don't forget that the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto, it's making a trine to Uranus, and it's also making a trine to Mars. Through socialization, you can feel things moving in the end. And I should also point out that Mars is making a trine to Uranus. There's a lot going on, and even though Mars is making an opposition to Saturn, that trine to Uranus perhaps gives you a way through. And however difficult things are, however frustrated you might feel, your own actions and your own individuality can take you through to the next stage. And maybe you just have to be unique. It doesn't matter what the pressure appears to be. It doesn't matter if you feel a bit embarrassed, but if you can just be yourself, be unapologetic about it, but at the same time, you're not trying to offend anyone. Make that clear. You're just trying to liven things up. And so, in the end, there may be a way round this issue with Mars opposition Saturn. And so if you rise to the challenge, it may not be such a bad Friday. Taurus, you are feeling a grand trine in air signs, and we've got the moon in Aquarius now, and the moon makes a trine to Mars, it makes a trine to Uranus, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And this grand trine in air signs, you might think, oh, well, you're a Taurus, you're an earth sign, is that really of any use to you? Well, I think it can be useful to you. It reminds you of what you want to achieve, what you want to accomplish, and your own path, whatever it might be, is really very unique. And it's something that you sometimes don't want to talk about it because you're concerned that maybe other people wouldn't understand, but you definitely have an idea about what it is that you want. And with the moon making that conjunction to Pluto and the trine to Mars and the trine to Uranus, it's really a lot of action, a lot of energy there. You have a chance to really connect with things that can support you in your ambitions. And maybe you're just connecting with the power of the solar system, and you're dealing with energies that might be at times difficult to handle, but what you're doing maybe is you're aligning yourself with something. You're even perhaps aligning yourself with the future. This future may not be immediately apparent, and it just might not seem very Taurean. Taurians, Taurians do have a reputation for being stuck in their ways, but I think that that's not necessarily the case now. So you're perhaps also realizing what it means for Pluto to be in Aquarius, and it's a relatively new experience. Okay, Pluto may have been in Aquarius since November, but that's not so long ago, and still you're struggling against it, and you perhaps want to sort of go back into the past. But here you get another reminder that things have changed, and if you have an ambition that you are really taking seriously, then I think that you can actually do something today to make it happen. And the earlier you get going on it, the better. So this is especially the case if you're in the Americas. Don't leave it until this evening. If you leave it too late, you might have missed your chance. It's okay. It's not a chance that is going to be gone forever, but it would be good to get something together today. And so, don't hold back, and Don't worry too much about what might go wrong. I understand that there is a full moon coming up. This full moon takes place over the weekend, and because you've got the moon is in Aquarius, the sun is in Leo, so the moon is slowly moving towards an opposition of the sun, and that full moon might make you sort of question why you're doing what you're doing, but it shouldn't be a time for questioning. If you can feel the energy, if you can feel the energy of the universe, and that really should sort of take you through, and you may not be alone. You don't have to provide all the excitement all by yourself. If you look around, you'll see that there are exciting and supportive people who are original, who are prepared to help you, get what you want, go in a direction you feel is right for you. But you do have to be open-minded. You're not the only person who is a unique individual. Everyone is a unique individual, but at the moment you can get in touch with people who really know what to do. They can take something that could be wonderful, and they can streamline it, and they can structure it, and they know what needs to be done. And so, Taurus, you don't have to think that everything needs to be done, all by yourself. And as far as relationships are concerned, the people around you can be very inspiring, and they can help you move in whatever direction you want to move. And at the same time, it does appear that your ability to get on with people, to form maybe new unions, to find new areas of common interest is going to be very good. So overall, Taurus, it's a day that you might start off by being concerned about. You might not think that anything particularly good is going to happen, but if you make the most of the day, if you seize the day, as they say, if you can do that, then I think that you can end up covering a great deal of ground. Gemini. At the moment, there is a grand trine in air signs, and probably you should be focusing on this grand trine. I mean, there are other things you might want to think about. The fact that Mars is opposition Saturn, and the Sun is sesquiquadrate Saturn, and these are rather difficult aspects, but you don't want to obsess about them. I mean, I know I am obsessing about them, and I have my Sun in Gemini, but for some reason I get obsessed about Mars-Saturn. For some reason I find Mars-Saturn aspects really exciting and interesting, but I'm maybe not a typical Gemini. And if I'm talking to sort of Geminis in general, I would encourage you not necessarily to worry too much about Mars opposition Saturn, and instead, to think about this grand trine. And it's an exciting energy. And so what we have is we've got Uranus moving through your sign. It's only just got there. It's only been there for the last few weeks, and Uranus, what's it? About a month. Been there about a month now. I think it went into Gemini on July the 7th, and so Uranus is about creating excitement. It's maybe even about bringing down the light, bringing inspiration your way. And Uranus is, on and off, going to be in Gemini for the next 7 years. So, do make the most of it. And the earlier you can make the most of it, the better. And, Uranus receives a trine aspect from Mars, and Uranus is also trine Pluto. And we got the Moon moving into Aquarius. So, Moon, making conjunction to Pluto, trine Uranus, trine Mars. And so, you're an air sign. So, as an air sign, you really can be inspired by this grand trine, and you can see what is possible, and you absolutely should not be limiting yourself. This is a time to be making the absolute most of whatever it is that you've got, and if you have ideas, you really explore them. an idea on its own might seem as if it's going nowhere, as if it's maybe far-fetched. It's just something you think about, and then 5 minutes later you've forgotten about it. But your ideas do matter, and inspiration does matter, and the more inspired you can be, the better. And so try to think about the positive. Don't worry too much about feasibility. While I'm not encouraging you to take risks, I'm just encouraging you to give everything a chance. And it's quite possible, Gemini, that there is something that you're really supposed to be doing. If the universe is talking to you, it's talking to you for a reason. And so listen. Don't just think about sort of idle trivialities. Try to understand the larger picture, and just do consider that possibility that you might have been chosen for something. And heliocentrically, we have got a trine between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury-Jupiter trines heliocentrically. Well, it's a great aspect, but sometimes heliocentric aspects are difficult to pick up on, particularly if we're just obsessed by the frivolous events taking place down here on planet Earth, and we're living sort of 5 minutes by 5 minutes, and we're just trying to enjoy ourselves, trying to exist. We have to go beyond that. And the heliocentric Mercury trine Jupiter, if you take advantage of it, it does really indicate that with Mercury, remember, is your ruler, but something is trying to communicate to you, and it also gives you the capacity to communicate, and you're able to communicate with power, and also with a high degree of optimism. Jupiter is the planet of optimism. And so Gemini, really try to focus on what is good and what is exciting, and don't think about the reasons why something might not be possible. And another thing with Mercury trine Jupiter, it could be linked to relationships, and who you're meeting and who you're getting on with. And it just could be that you're talking to someone who you might not know very well, and you suddenly feel that you've got something in common, that you've got something to talk about, and you may agree with each other. And so give people a chance, and if you give other people a chance, they might be giving you a chance. And if you've got lots of ideas with this grand trine in air, maybe what you say will strike a chord with another person. So I think that today, Gemini, in spite of the Mars being opposition Saturn, it looks like things can really come together. But it's so important that you focus on the positive, and you don't worry too much about what might go wrong. Cancer. There is an opposition between Mars and Saturn today. Or, okay, if you're not in the Americas, it's going to be tomorrow. But this Mars-Saturn opposition is really very close now. And the Mars opposition Saturn aspect is across an important axis of your chart. So Mars is in Libra, Saturn's in Aries, in cardinal signs. You, Cancer, are a cardinal sign, and so this Mars-Saturn opposition does make you think about what you want and what you would like to achieve, but at the same time you're also thinking about why things might go wrong. And you're thinking about all of the sort of many reasons why you should stay where you are and not take risks and not embrace the future. And part of that is connected with Mars moving into Libra. So with Mars moving into Libra, Cancer, it's possible that a lot of your energies do go into your home and your family and into into security. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are too focused on your own security, then you might miss out on opportunities. You might see an opportunity today, and not just today. I mean, Saturn has just gone into Aries, and on and off, Saturn will be it will be in Aries for the next couple of years. And so this is a time, Cancer, where you need to be thinking about the future, thinking about what is important to you, and thinking about your ambitions. And that might require a degree of courage to be able to sort of move away from what is safe and secure and comfortable. But right now with Mars opposition Saturn, that might be hard work, and you might just be worried. What happens if you take the plunge? What happens if you do something you've never done before? What could happen? And it's true that Cancerians can put safety first, and they can be so focused on safety that opportunities can slip them by, and that would be a shame. And so Cancer, you have to look after yourself, but you need to have an ability to see through things and to look at possibilities, and that means going beyond the surface. And the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto, and it's also making a trine to Mars, and it's making a trine to Uranus. So that's quite exciting, and it does allow you to see possibilities that you might not be very comfortable with, but they do exist. And at first it might be quite a private process of realization. Things are happening, things are opening up for you, and you can see it. You don't necessarily have to talk about it, but you can see the chance, and you can see what you could do, and deep down it's the right thing to do, but still you might hold back. And I would advise you I would certainly advise you not to take risks. But if you're too risk averse, Cancer, then you might end up delaying a valuable opportunity. I say delay. I don't think we're talking about opportunities being missed forever, but there is a chance here to make something happen more quickly than it would have done otherwise. Now, I do get that we're in a period that is difficult. There are some difficult aspects. It's not just Mars opposition Saturn, it's Sun's sesquiquadrate Saturn. It's also, we've got a full moon, and I appreciate that there are a lot of things to be concerned about, and that we live in a world that is not very safe, and there are always bad things that could happen. I do get all that, but you get that as well. And being a Cancerian, you actually have the sensitivity to get around it all. You can. You understand what's needed, what's required of you, and because of your appreciation of safety issues, I'm not talking about physical safety. I mean just general caution. Because of your caution, you can accomplish a huge amount, because it's the caution allows you to get around obstacles, and you move around this obstacle and that obstacle, and you find the right path, and in the end you make solid progress. Leo, there is a sesquiquadrate today between the Sun and Saturn. And so yesterday there was a semi-square between the Sun and Mars. Now there's a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Saturn, and this Sun-Saturn sesquiquadrate could quite literally weigh in on you. Of course, we think about Saturn as being potentially about some kind of heavy weight that may potentially be dragging us down, and at times that might be how it feels, that you can't do what you want to do. And you can see it like the sun in Leo. There's you, sun in Leo, sun in its own sign, strong, but Saturn is holding you back, and this annoys you, and you might also have a feeling of inevitability, but there's really nothing you can do. You just have to accept the situation. You've taken something as far as you can, but what more can you do? And I would suggest, Leo, that you think beyond this sort of a temporary problem. Yeah, you might be being held back, and what is it that's holding you back? It could be, Leo, but you're just not prepared to take the next step. Leo is a fixed sign. You can be very sure of your ideas. You've made up your mind, and you're confronted with something which is different and challenging. You're confronted with it, and you don't want to be bothered with it. And because you can't be bothered with it, you get stuck. And so, in order to get round this Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, you have to introduce new material, introduce new ideas, and also be aware that there are many ways of going about things. So you want to do something, you can't do it in the most easy and obvious way, so you do it in a different way. I mean, that would be a logical approach. But Leo, you might be inclined to only try something in one way, the way you feel most comfortable, and just you don't explore other alternatives. And because you don't explore other alternatives, you might give yourself the impression you're stuck. And furthermore, you might create stories about why you're stuck, and you might have stories about situations beyond your control just messing you up, or perhaps it's other people messing you up, and that might be how it all sort of works, and you've got a good reason, but it's not a good reason, and there's always a way through. And this Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn may additionally say something about relationships, and so with the Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, that does indicate that potentially you and another person have an uneasy relationship. There's an uneasy connection, and this other person, it could be someone who you know very well, it could be someone you meet the first time, but someone who is nonetheless important. But it's just difficult to find instant connections. I mean, you'd love to find instant connections, just everything flowing easily, but that's not how today is going to be like. And so if you want to benefit from another person's company, you may have to really work on it, and you must not be too set in your ways. I mean, that would be very unfortunate, because I think that perhaps through your own arrogance or single-mindedness, you could spoil something. And the reality is that everyone has got something to offer, and you can learn things from another person, even if that other person isn't really on your wavelength. There is still a learning process that is there, and it could be quite an important learning process. Through links with the right person, you could be encouraged to see the world and your perceptions in a completely different way, and in a way that is potentially quite liberating. But you've got to be open to that possibility. And additionally, we do have the moon moving through Aquarius, and Aquarius is your opposite sign. Aquarius is a sign that's often very connected with relationships. So, if you give relationships, your best shot, then something might happen. The moon is making a conjunction to Pluto, making a square, trine to Mars, trine to Uranus. Other people can make life more exciting, or the right people can make life more exciting. The wrong people can, of course, be difficult. I mean, moon trine Mars, moon trine Uranus might represent a person who is behaving irresponsibly or is too obsessed by their own ideas and plans. That is one way of looking at it, but I think we need to try to be positive and consider the possibility that some people really are sort of quite exciting, and they can just make things a lot more interesting for you if you just give them the chance. Virgo. At the moment, Virgo, we do have a lot going on, astrologically. I've gone on and on about Mars opposition Saturn, Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, and of course we've got a full moon over the weekend, and it might all seem rather too much, but from your perspective, I don't really think it's such a problem. These rather sort of dramatic events needn't inhibit your freedom of action, and if you instead concentrate on what you're good at, and you just be an individual, that should be enough. That should be enough to give you actually quite a satisfying day. And you shouldn't forget that there's a grand trine in air signs, and this grand trine in air signs is asking you to look at things in a new way, and also look at how you can benefit in ways that you perhaps in the past hadn't really thought through. And so, what we have, we've got Uranus in Gemini, trine Pluto, trine Mars, and, Uranus in Gemini. That is an important placement, planetary placement, Uranus in Gemini, for a Virgo, because, Gemini, it's a high-profile sign. It's an important sign in your chart, and it's potentially about you being dramatic and having really interesting ideas, perhaps relating to career or business, or just how you want to project yourself, and wanting to be taken notice of. Now, that's something that one doesn't normally associate with Virgo. Virgo is traditionally seen as being a service-orientated sign, thinking about other people, not wanting to draw too much attention to itself. But sometimes you have to go further than that, and Uranus in Gemini is asking you to be an individual, and it will be asking you for quite a long time, because Uranus does stay in Gemini for 7 years, and give or take. And so Uranus in Gemini it's making a trine to the moon. Moon's making a trine to Uranus. Pluto's making a trine to Uranus. Mars is making a trine to Uranus, and these aspects they're exciting, but they also have a material nature to them. They are about increasing what you have, and that might be about status. It might be about money. It could be just about the whole way in which you are organizing yourself. Virgo is a sign that's often associated with good organization, and you might think that organization is all in order, but you've got organizational matters completely sorted out. Well, maybe you have, but things could be even better. And with this grand trine in air signs, you can change the way you manage things, and you can change your schedule. Just because you've done something every day at a particular time for the last 20 years, for example, doesn't mean you have to keep on doing it like this. In fact, a change of schedule, the right change of schedule, could be very helpful. It may open new possibilities for you, and I think that these possibilities are really being shown now with this grand trine in air signs. Now, turning to relationships, I would have said that relationships are probably optional. I don't think you'd have to worry too much about what other people are doing. But heliocentrically, there is a trine between Mercury and Jupiter at the moment, and Mercury and Jupiter in the Virgo horoscope are two planets that are related to other people and how you get on with other people. And so, if Mercury and Uranus, Mercury and Jupiter are trine each other, that might mean that relationships take an unexpected turn, but a turn for the better. That things, to your surprise, work out, and surprise may be quite an operative word there. You shouldn't make assumptions about how another person is going to behave. You should allow people to be individuals. You should even allow them to be ever so slightly outrageous and certainly surprising in what they do and what they say, and do allow people to be individuals. And if you can do that, then your confidence, and it does require confidence and trust to allow another person to be an individual, to be a real individual, not to have any judgments. If you can do that, then I think your trust will be vindicated. Libra. At the moment, Libra, there is a lot going on. Yesterday I mentioned that Mars is moving into your sign, and of course Mars will stay in your sign until I think September the 22nd, so for the next sort of 6 weeks or so. And so Mars moving through Libra certainly has its advantages. It makes you more dynamic, and if you want to do something, you can. And if you feel that something is not right, you can insist on change, and you really can make things happen. And at the same time, though, at least today and sort of tomorrow, Mars is making an opposition to Saturn, and this Mars-Saturn opposition could be troubling. Because Mars is in your sign, Saturn is in Aries, Saturn's in your opposite sign, so it's hitting an important axis of your chart. And one way in which this Mars-Saturn opposition might manifest is feeling quite frustrated. You feel that there are things you can't do. You'd like to do them, but you just can't. And it might seem that the reason is perhaps other people's intransigence. They're not prepared to budge. And if that is the case, then what has happened is that you have made your own freedom of action contingent on another person's behavior, or perhaps on another person's permission. And you have to ask whether that's really a good thing. I mean, Mars in Libra should be about you taking the initiative, you doing what you feel you want to do, but then that Saturn is kind of something saying, no, you can't do it. And it might feel as if someone is saying no to you. But I think you have to go beyond that. And if something is important to you, Libra, then you should probably go and do it, and not create stories that you can't do it because it might upset someone, or they might say no, or it might create a difficult situation. But these might just be stories that Librans like to create. I mean, you don't, at some level, want to commit yourself. It's best not to commit yourself, and you maybe don't want to upset anyone, and perhaps you're being too reasonable, and maybe today you need to not allow that Mars-Saturn opposition to get you down. Instead you should be thinking about other aspects that Mars is making. For example, Mars is making a trine to Uranus, it's making a trine to Pluto. Additionally, the moon is making a trine to Mars. So we've got a grand trine in air signs, and you, Libra, are an air sign. And so this grand trine indicates to me that you do have, a great deal of freedom. Things can just work, and if you start putting your energy into something, that's all you do. You just have to put a bit of energy into something, and then the whole thing starts to run quicker and quicker, and you've really created something. And it's something that at times you might be worried about. It might all be too much, but it's not too much. It's almost certainly for the best, and you're in a position where you can get a huge amount of satisfaction by doing what you want to do. And I'm not talking about just sort of hedonistic pleasure, just doing something for kicks. It is about something that relates to who you are and what you're all about. And so Libra, it could be a day when you need to have some courage to be an individual, and also don't naturally assume that other people are going to block you. They're not. Your ability to get on with people at the moment is pretty good, and additionally you can create enthusiasm in another person. So another person might be sitting on the fence, they don't have any ideas, and you just talk to them enthusiastically about what is important to you, and that can stir something. And you may be surprised to find how acceptable your ideas really are. So don't assume that you're just going to be rejected. Sometimes if you're honest about what you want to do, and you have the requisite level of enthusiasm, that should be enough. And so maybe you can be a trendsetter, and you can be the one taking the initiative, and that's perhaps what people want. We are living in difficult times, with this Mars opposition Saturn and the full moon, and so, but you can go beyond these difficulties, and you can perhaps help other people to go beyond them. And so you can really help them find the freedom that they are secretly looking for. Scorpio. Mars is making an opposition to Saturn. That kind of sounds boring, because I've been saying that Mars is opposition to Saturn quite a lot in this video. But it's true, Mars is opposition Saturn, and it's exact today if you're in the Americas. If you're not in the Americas, it will be exact tomorrow. So it's there. And Mars opposition Saturn is an aspect that is going to have an impact on you. Mars is your ruler, and it is opposition Saturn. So the question is, what kind of impact is that, and how do you manage it? And with Mars opposition Saturn, it's possible that you feel that something is just holding you back. You're looking for action, you're looking to do something, but it's just not working out. And you might then feel that it's all hopeless. What is the point? And perhaps you feel chaotic and disorganized, and you don't know what to do. Yeah, you've got the germ of an idea, but what else? And you might then also feel that perhaps you don't have the strength that you used to have. Maybe a few days ago things were going fine, but now it's more difficult, and you have to worry excessively about what other people are doing, what other people want, and you're just thinking, well, what is the point? So what do you do about it? Well, Mars opposition Saturn can be seen as a negative aspect. I mean, as I've said right at the beginning of this video, Mars opposition Saturn can be connected with frustration, destruction, even death. But I'm not saying, by the way, anything bad is going to happen to you. And in fact, I'm saying there is a way to use this Mars opposition Saturn, and what you have to think about is the challenge between these two planets. And these two planets are not entirely disconnected, because Mars is in Libra. Okay, Mars might be in its detriment in Libra, but Mars is in the exaltation sign of Saturn, and likewise Saturn is in Aries, which is a sign ruled by Mars. So Mars and Saturn have a linkage here. It may not be a very easy linkage, but it is there. And perhaps what you need to do is just make sure that everything is done properly. And it might just be that you have to do some very careful planning. And planning is maybe just not something you want to do. You haven't really thought about it. If you can't do it, well, that's the end of the matter. But if something is important to you, and you feel that it's something you really just have to do, then it is possible to be too spontaneous. You do something spur of a moment. Okay, you want to do it, you hit a brick wall. But on the other hand, you can just organize it, plan it. You could perhaps plan something in sort of painstaking detail, without being knocked off your track. You could get knocked off your track. I mean, that's certainly possible. There are a lot of things going on around you which are confusing. You don't really understand where they're going. I mean, you do understand in that Scorpio way. Scorpio is quite a sensitive, emotional sign, but you're not prepared to really admit it. And because you're not prepared to admit what is happening, you're leaving yourself in a state of confusion. And so that is a danger. So Scorpio, try as far as you can to be honest with yourself. And then as well, just make sure that everything is carefully planned. And, then things can start to work, and you might find your groove, and you might be helped by the fact that Mars is making a trine to Uranus. It's also making a trine to Pluto. Okay, it's not exact today, that trine to Pluto, but Mars trine Uranus is a high energy aspect, and it just could be, Scorpio, that you start off the day feeling nothing is happening, being quite negative, but you find something within yourself. You find the power within yourself, and it is that organizing power. You know what needs to be done, and then you can start to change things at a root foundational level. And because you've sorted out the foundations of everything, and it's not just sorting them out, it's perhaps transforming things at a foundational level. And once you've done that, then Scorpio, you can really start to find your own power. And you could end up, of all the 12 signs, being one of the most powerful today. And so you just have to get yourself together. You certainly have to be aware of what you can do, but you also have to understand that it requires organization, it requires planning, it requires discipline. But I don't think that's anything you can't do. So perhaps Scorpio, whether or not it is a good day or a bad day, may to a great extent be your choice. Sagittarius. The moon is now in Aquarius, very much in Aquarius, and it's making nice aspects to Mars. Moon is making a trine to Mars, making a trine to Uranus, and in fact we've got a grand trine in air signs, and this is perhaps what you should be thinking about. For you, things really can start to move, and they can move probably with the help of other people. You don't have to do things on your own. It might seem easier to do things alone, but if you're on your own, you don't have an alternative perspective, and you might find yourself being unnecessarily negative, and you might not make a great deal of progress. But in company with other people, when you're talking to other people, when you're getting feedback from other people, I do think that things can really start to happen. So think about what you're doing today, and if you are alone, then you might have to sort of pare your expectations. It may not be possible to accomplish very much, but the more you're able to interact with other people, the more you're able to talk to people, be with other people, be with your friends, then that creates an energy of its own, and it's connected with this grand trine in air signs. And so once one thing happens and something else happens, and there's no stopping it, and you can just have a great time. That is possible. And while you're having a great time, there's no need to compromise. There is a Mars-Saturn opposition, which I've been going on and on about. Now, this Mars opposition Saturn, there's absolutely no reason for this Mars-Saturn opposition to affect you in a negative way. If it were to affect you in a negative way, then it is possible that someone pressurizes you to do one thing, not do another thing, and perhaps to neglect your own interests, and perhaps to put your energy into their interests, and you might give in to this pressure, but there's no need to give in. So just make sure that the other people, the people you're associating with, do appreciate you and don't put pressure on you. They don't ask you to do anything. So if anyone is asking you to do something today, and if anyone is sort of demanding your time and your attention, then that could be a warning. This person is not necessarily going to work out for you. Their influence may not be helpful, and they could sort of lead you into a situation where you're doing something that is just not you. It's not for you. You're doing it for another person, and that might sound nice and selfless, but I don't think today is a day when you want to be selfish, selfless. I think it's actually better to be selfish and to concentrate on what you are, and not worry about outside expectations. Capricorn. We do have an opposition between Mars and Saturn. That's what I'm telling everyone. And some people are not going to be affected that much by this opposition. You, Capricorn, probably will be, because Saturn is your ruler. And so, if Saturn is your ruler and it gets an opposition from Mars, that could stir you up. And Mars could represent, aggravation, something annoying you. You'd like everything to be done in a particular way. You perhaps had things set up. You knew what you wanted. You knew what you didn't want. And it was all in order. Then something comes along. Mars opposition Saturn. It sort of interferes with your equilibrium. And there's then the question is, what do you do with outside pressure? It's not that outside pressure should be ignored. Sometimes outside pressure is important. If you're being asked to do something which you didn't want to do, but you realize you actually have to do it, then you should probably do what is necessary. Yeah, it might be an inconvenience, but it could be a necessary inconvenience. And this especially applies if you're working. So if you are working, then it may not be an entirely smooth day. So if you are an employee and your employer or someone above you in the hierarchy is telling you to do something, you're not going to want to do it. But I think you should probably still go ahead and do it. Do what's expected of you. But only up to a point. It's not like you have to give in to outside pressure, but you have to, at the very least, respect it, sort of pay lip service to it, show that you are concerned with what's being told, and you don't want anyone to think that you're ignoring them or that you're just too focused on your own interest to pay anyone decent attention. So everyone needs attention, and what you do, having given them attention, well, is maybe up to you. And if you are more independently set up, maybe you have your own business, or you're doing things in your own way, whatever they might be. An opportunity could crop up, or someone just wants your attention. You don't want to give them your attention because you've got better things to do, but it might be a situation where you can benefit. And with this Mars opposition Saturn, you should remember that Mars and Saturn do have a certain sympathy with one another, because Mars is in Libra, which is the exaltation sign of Saturn, and Saturn is in Aries, which is a sign ruled by Mars. So you should not assume a conflict, even if you're being told to do something you absolutely don't want to do, because by listening to another person, then you're making a good impression, and it may not be the work you do that counts. It may just be about respect, and that just could be all that matters. And it's not just Mars opposition Saturn; it's also the fact that we've got Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn. So today we've got this really quite important lineup. Saturn being hit by Mars and being hit by the Sun, and perhaps the Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn is more complicated, and the Sun could relate to your own feelings and your own perceptions, and you might be taking something too seriously, and you decide that it's so important that you have to drop everything and really think about it. And it may not be outside pressure, it may be pressure from yourself to drop everything and obsess. And obsess is probably not something you want to do. But you could. It really is a possibility. And additionally, there may be an emotional side to things. I don't think, Capricorn, you want too much emotion today. There may be emotional people around you. There is, after all, Venus and Jupiter in Cancer, and they're in your opposite sign. Venus and Jupiter are moving towards a conjunction, and so that could be quite an emotional conjunction, and you can worry about that later. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction isn't exact until Monday, but as far as today is concerned, too much emotion just could be troubling, and it could waste a lot of your time, and it's just probably a distraction that you don't really need. And distractions you have to be careful about. You could so easily do something which is completely uncharacteristic. Capricorn, or at least the typical textbook Capricorn, is someone who is quite sensible. They don't make mistakes. They don't do something necessarily on the spur of the moment, but there just may be a time when you do something without really thinking about it. You don't quite think about the consequences. It might even seem to be quite a dynamic and assertive thing to do, but it hadn't occurred to you how another person was going to behave, or how something else was going to respond. And you see the response, and it's absolutely not what you intended. So, probably, Capricorn, today you should avoid doing things, on the spur of the moment, because it just might not work out as planned. Aquarius, what do you want to hear about? Do you want to hear about the fact that Mars is opposition Saturn, or that the Sun is sesquiquadrate Saturn? Two rather difficult aspects. Or do you want to think about the grand trine in air signs and the fact that the Moon is in your sign? I think probably you should be thinking more about the grand trine. We need to focus on the positive, don't we? I mean, the Moon is now in Aquarius. Okay, if you're in Australasia, then this morning it might still be in Capricorn, but by lunchtime it will be in Aquarius. And so, with the Moon moving into your sign, that's got to be good news. You can be positive, and you can be outward-going, and you can pick up on the energy of the solar system. After all, the Moon, when it in Aquarius, it makes a trine to Mars, it makes a trine to Uranus, it makes a conjunction to Pluto, and this could be really very invigorating, and you are in a position to make things happen, and it is about taking this latent energy, perhaps the latent energy of the universe, and using it for your own purposes, whatever those purposes might be. Of course, it's not just some random purpose. If you want to be successful, you've got to think about your purpose and define that purpose. But if you want to get things to move, this is very much something you can do, and at the same time you can very much focus on yourself, your own ideas, your own views, your own independence, and indeed it's not just your independence, maybe even your quirkiness. You have this sort of unique way of looking at things which not everyone understands, but it's important to you, and in the end ultimately it's important to everyone else. And so with this grand trine in air, it's a great time for making an impression, for making changes, and for exploration as well. I mean, with Mars moving through Libra, it's in Libra till September the 22nd, and so it allows you to see things in a different way, to explore, and perhaps to change some of your ideas. You shouldn't be fixed to any particular idea. There's always the possibility of change, and change is good. It's not even that you're abandoning one idea in favor of another idea. It's all about development, and it's about progress. And so this grand trine in air really does seem helpful, and it can make for a very vibrant day. But I would be dishonest with you if I wasn't to mention the fact that Mars is opposition Saturn. I mean, Saturn is your ruler, and Saturn, you might then say, is sort of under pressure from Mars. So how do we see this? So if Mars is making an opposition to Saturn, that might be an annoyance. It could be a danger, something you're not familiar with, putting you under a great deal of pressure. And furthermore, we've got the Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn. Now, Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn may say something about relationships, because Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius, your sign. Sun is ruler of Leo, your opposite sign. So you have Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn. So one way of looking at that is to say, well, it's about you and another person, and you don't necessarily get on with each other. And one reason you might not get on with each other, because you're dealing with someone who is, very stuck in their ways. They refuse to compromise. They refuse to see alternative views, and maybe that is the case. But you shouldn't jump to conclusions. Just because someone is set in their ways, just because someone doesn't change their mind, doesn't mean that they're wrong. And additionally, with this Mars-Saturn opposition, we should perhaps see it as being part of a larger structure, because we have a grand trine in air signs, but we also have a kite. So the kite forms, with the kite we've got the grand trine, but then we've got Mars opposition Saturn being like the spine of the kite. So you can see the kite. So there is the grand trine, and then with Mars opposition Saturn, you can see a sort of kite-like object. And so Mars opposition Saturn might be the resolution. And so you could say that the grand trine in air signs does represent energy and inspiration and ideas and excitement, but because it's a grand trine, there's no effort, and there's a danger that it just dissipates. You have moments of excitement, but it goes nowhere, and you're thinking afterwards, well, what was that? Well, that was nice, but it's gone. But Mars opposition Saturn could be about structure. You take this energy and you work with it. You don't want to work with it, but you do work with it. You take your ideas, perhaps the ideas that have been given to you by some sort of high-level cosmic process, and you take these ideas and you work with these ideas. Perhaps you write them down, you structure them, you streamline them, you work out what is possible, and in the process, you're developing your own new stance, your own philosophy, and your own blueprint for the future. So that might be the best way of dealing with all the stuff that is going on. And if you can perhaps see it, if you can perhaps connect the Mars opposition Saturn with the grand trine by seeing it as part of a kite, that may be the way to make the most of things. So that could be very powerful, and it may in fact really elevate you and put you in control, and allow you to make the absolute most of your potential. Pisces, there's a lot going on today. That's true, but the question is, does it really have a huge impact on you? And you could say that it probably doesn't. I've talked about grand trine in air signs. I've talked about Mars opposition Saturn, Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, and it's going to have an impact on a lot of people, and the impact is not always going to be positive, but from a Piscean perspective, it just might be something you just want to watch. You can see that things are going on, and you can see that there is a certain amount of drama, but you can also just be an observer, just watch it all. Perhaps it's like sort of watching a film, or sort of common internet cliche is what is it? You're eating popcorn because you're being entertained. I don't know quite how entertaining a Mars-Saturn opposition is. Watching it from a distance. The Mars-Saturn opposition could create a lot of frustration. Will it affect you? If we look at your horoscope, we can create a scenario where it might affect you. The Mars-Saturn opposition could be about money and your attitude to money, and also how you respond to other people's attitude to money. So if you decide to get worked up about money and to engage in financial arguments and controversies, then the Mars-Saturn opposition is going to have an impact on you, and the impact may not be entirely positive. But you might decide you want an easy day, and if you want an easy day, perhaps you should leave financial matters for later. You don't have to get involved with them. Now, this grand trine. We can always find a way in which this grand trine has an impact on you, and one could say that the grand trine may say something about your approach and attitude to your home. Uranus has just gone into Aquarius. It's been in Aquarius for about a month, and in the Pisces chart, Uranus has gone into Gemini, not Aquarius. So Uranus is in Gemini. It's been in Gemini for about a month. And so with Uranus in Gemini, that might say something about your home, what is comfortable, where you feel safe, where you feel secure. But Uranus is not a planet that likes to stay still. It stirs things up. And so with this grand trine, when you look around you, you look at your home, where you're living, you look at how you're relating to your family, and you're thinking, well, maybe this isn't quite good enough. Maybe you'd like to create some change. And it's a kind of change that in the end could be dramatic, but maybe you don't have to talk about it right now. And it's just certain things are coming together. You'd had sort of ideas and thoughts, and it didn't make a great deal of sense. But now with this grand trine, you're coming to some private conclusions. You haven't got the full picture quite yet, but you're getting there. And at the end of this process, you might realize, for example, that you want to be somewhere else. Or if you want to stay where you are, you want to make changes. And you will expect, in the end, other people to fit in with these changes. That includes your family. Might in fact be your family. If they live with you, or other people who might be living with you, and you're going to want it all to happen on your terms. But this could be quite a slow process. Don't forget that Uranus is about to turn retrograde. Okay, it doesn't turn retrograde immediately, but I think Uranus is going to go retrograde, the beginning of September, and then it sort of goes back. It goes back into Taurus, and then it doesn't go into Gemini again until the beginning of next year. So maybe some of your decisions that you're making, right now, they'll become clearer, and it may not be until early next year that you start to realize that no, this is a time. This is a time that you want to put a theory into practice. But in a general sense, Pisces, looking at today, probably there isn't much to be said. If you do have thoughts, realizations, inspirations, then I would suggest that you probably keep them to yourself. And that's it for the 12 signs, and I want to now switch to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 21. And 21 is biting through. It's quite a tough hexagram, and perhaps in keeping with the fact that we've got Mars opposition Saturn, nothing is easy. If we want to get to the gold with biting through, we have to bite through something hard, perhaps a lever or something like that, to get to the gold. And this hexagram is often connected with punishment. Someone is doing something wrong. They need to be disciplined. They need to go back to the straight and narrow. Could be us doing something wrong. Could be someone else. And it is our job to administer justice. Well, administering justice, I assume you're not a judge. Maybe there is a judge watching this, but I doubt it. So if you're not used to administering justice, it's not what most people do. even you know, police officers don't really administer justice, do they? Well, unless they're Judge Dredd. But think about your behavior, think about other people's behavior, and think about whether the behavior is correct. Because sometimes things need to change, and sometimes you need to say something. And if something is wrong and someone is not behaving right, you may have to say something. And as far as punishment, there is a punishment element. So I mean, I don't know what scope you have to punish. I mean, simply correcting someone, criticizing them can be a kind of punishment. I mean, it's not really a punishment, but you're trying to reform someone, and that's really what this hexagram is about, trying to reform. And that is something that we can do. And of course, we should think about ourselves first. We need to make sure that our own position is absolutely 100%. You know, we don't go criticizing another person until we make sure that we are as good as we can get. And there is a fifth line moving. The fifth line moves, and the fifth line is indicating that we can be successful, and we have to say something. If someone is doing something wrong, we have to get the balance right. It seems that when we're dealing with people who are misbehaving, again, it could be ourselves, there is a tendency to be lenient, to not take it too seriously. But the I Ching tells us that we need to be moderate, and moderate means being in the middle. You can be too lenient, or you can be not lenient enough. But you need to be practical. You need to think about what you're trying to achieve. And the I Ching tells us that we can actually achieve a great deal, and that we can make real progress, and not just in terms of getting people to reform themselves. It's not just about that. It's about really making real progress. But we need to know when to stop. And what I often say with this hexagram, biting through, there is a connection of the teeth, and we're trying to digest something, we're trying to chew something up, and if we push something too far, we don't perhaps give it enough thought, we can break our teeth. So that might be a literal warning here. If you're biting down into I don't know, cereal, cherries, whatever it is, watch your teeth. That is just a general warning. So don't take things too far. And one thing you shouldn't take too far is leniency. Now, I've got fifth line moving. Does mean that we'll move to a different hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 25, which is the unexpected, something happening that we weren't expecting. And the advice here is that we need to be innocent. We shouldn't assume that there is going to be any particular outcome. So in terms of a previous hexagram, we're doing our best to make sure everyone is behaving right. But we shouldn't be doing it for any reason. We shouldn't be thinking that there's any benefit there, any gain for ourselves or for another person. We should just do it because it has to be done, because it is the right thing to do. And so as we move to the unexpected, there should be no expectations, and we should be just open to all possibilities. And if we're open to all possibilities, then we are actually creating the space for something good to happen, for something fortunate to come into our lives. And it can, but we mustn't think about it. You must almost sort of not think about that possibility. So it's now time to go back to the astrology and to the fact that we do have this opposition between Mars and Saturn. And it is happening today, or it could be happening tomorrow. In fact, in the Americas, it happens late today. Sort of tomorrow, it's or tomorrow if you're somewhere else. So let's start off by looking at the chart of this aspect. Mars opposition Saturn. So London time, it happens at 3:52 a.m. on Saturday. If you're in the Americas, it will happen on Friday evening. And so, you can see Mars is at 1 degree 20 Libra, and Saturn is at 1 degree 20 Aries. So there's the opposition. And the Mars-Saturn opposition, it has quite a difficult reputation, because Mars and Saturn are the two malefics. Saturn is the greater malefic. Mars is the lesser benefic, and it's a lesser malefic. And so when they are together, that can spell trouble. And Mars opposition Saturn, that is a difficult aspect. So Mars and Saturn, the two malefics, are at war with one another, and this could create some rather negative results. And so today, things might be very frustrating. We're trying to get things done, but it just doesn't work out. And additionally, when we look at what's happening in the world, then it doesn't look great. I mean, looking at the news, well, Donald Trump is quite, at the moment, I'm doing this video for Friday, but I'm actually recording it on Thursday morning. So from what I can see, Thursday morning with Donald Trump, he seems to be quite excited about the prospects for talking to Putin, and that this might lead to peace or a ceasefire. I have my doubts, but that's that is going on at the moment. And so where is this going to lead? But this is all happening with Mars opposition Saturn. That doesn't seem to be a particularly good omen. But Mars opposition Saturn may just represent something else, something else going on somewhere in the world, and it's not a fortunate signature. And what makes it more difficult is the fact that it's tied up with the Sun. So the Sun is making a semi-square to Mars. We saw that yesterday, but that Sun semi-square Mars still is very much in operation. And the Sun is sesquiquadrate to Saturn. So we got Sun, Mars, Saturn, all in the same place, at least, on the 90-degree dial. Or if you want to look at it in a different way, on the fourth harmonic, the eighth harmonic, they are all together, because So if I look at the eighth harmonic for the Mars opposition Saturn, you should see Sun, Mars, and Saturn all together. So the eighth harmonic shows Sun at 14 degrees Aries, Mars at 10 degrees Aries, Saturn at 10 degrees 42 Aries. So, by the way, the eighth harmonic is, of course, derived by multiplying everything by 8. So, in fact, if you look at, in the eighth harmonic, Saturn is at 1042. So the reason I get 1042 is because I take Saturn's position at 1 degree whatever, and I literally multiply it by 8, and that gets me to 10 degrees 42. So there is our Mars-Saturn, our exact Mars-Saturn opposition, which is shown as a conjunction on the eighth harmonic, and there is our Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, which is also shown as a conjunction, because this is an eighth harmonic. So Sun, Mars, Saturn coming together is not necessarily very easy. So I do think that in theory this should be, or could be, a very stressful day, when things are not necessarily going to be very easy. And this may be indicated by the news flow. What is happening in the world. So there could be sort of Mars-Saturn events. And of course, a lot of us are under pressure anyway. and there is a lot going on that could go wrong. And thinking about this Mars-Saturn aspect, I'm thinking about, where is it going to have maximum impact? I mean, I'm not going to set up sort of any sort of astrocartography for it, but let me just go back to the normal chart. So this Mars opposition Saturn, I said I don't really want to look at it from an astrocartography viewpoint, and instead, I just want to consider, what is it aspecting, what is it transiting, and so if we look at the horoscope of Palestine, for example, so here is the horoscope of Palestine, and this is when Palestinian independence was declared on November the 15th, 1988. I make it 12:40 a.m. in Algiers, not on the West Bank or in Gaza. It was declared in Algiers. And so at that moment where Palestine declared its independence, Mars was square Saturn. Mars was at 1 degree 51 Aries, and Saturn was at 0 degrees 16 Capricorn. So Mars square Saturn, it's got Mars Saturn in its chart anyway. I mean, Mars Saturn is this death square, and that seems to have been how Palestine has unfolded. It has not been an easy time for Palestine since 1988. It's got its own external enemy in the form of Israel, but it's got its own internal problems. And in terms of Gaza, electing Hamas in Gaza in 20 years ago, and Hamas has stayed in power, probably wasn't such a good idea. And so Mars and Saturn could also be about the sort of the honouring of death and martyrdom, and death is part of Palestine. I mean, that's what it's all about, because it's in the chart. But Mars is at 1 degree Aries, Saturn is at 0 degrees Capricorn. So this Mars-Saturn square is being aspected by a Mars-Saturn opposition. So you can see, if you look at the aspect, there's Palestine's Mars at 151 Aries, there's Saturn at 1 degree 20 Aries. So Saturn is conjunct Palestine's Mars, and we are seeing the sort of the devastation happening in Gaza. But additionally, transiting Mars it's got Mars opposition Mars. So it may be more of the same. I think it's going to be very difficult when you look at Palestine to actually isolate this Mars-Saturn opposition, because there's always bad things going on in Gaza. And so, it's just going to perhaps be a difficult few days, but it may be more than that. There may be something about the events taking place over the course of the day, which are over the course of the next couple of days, which are especially difficult for Palestine. And we just shouldn't forget that it's got Saturn on its Mars all the time. It's got Neptune on its Mars. In fact, Neptune right now, on Friday, is at 1 degree 51 Aries, and of course Palestine has its Mars at 1 degree 51 Aries. So it's not looking great, is it? And then there is Starmer, Keir Starmer, his regime. When Keir Starmer seized power, no, sorry, he didn't seize power, actually, did he? It happened through an election. I shouldn't have said that. It just perhaps sort of slipped off my tongue. He got a huge majority. He didn't get a very high % of the vote, but that's when he became Prime Minister. And so I make it, if that really happened at around 12:15, that would mean that there was 148 Libra on the ascendant, and so therefore 148 Aries on the descendant. So this Mars-Saturn opposition is right on the ascendant descendant of the starmer regime. So that is not good. And the ascendant and the descendant talks about its enemies, how it presents itself to the public. And so, this is just, more evidence of the kind of problems that Starmer is getting himself into. And then you could also link that with a midheaven at 220 Cancer. So Saturn, Mars and Saturn were square the midheaven and square the IC. It's interesting that Starmer, when he became leader of the Labour Party, on April the 4th, 2020, at 10:45 a.m., I think, when he was declared that he'd won the contest after Corbyn stepped down. There was a Mars-Saturn conjunction when he became leader of the Labour Party. So you could say that Starmer is quite sensitive to the Mars-Saturn cycle. And of course, this Mars-Saturn conjunction is being hit by Pluto at the moment. Pluto is 2 degrees Aquarius or something like that. So it's not good for Starmer, this Mars-Saturn opposition, and it seems that the Labour Party really can't really get very much right. And it's also the economy matters, obviously. You might think it's about immigration and so forth, but if the economy is going fine, people aren't so worried about immigration. But when things really seem to be going from bad to worse, it is a problem. And one thing that the Starmer has to work with is the Bank of England. So the Bank of England came into being on August the 6th, 1694. And the Bank of England has a Mars-Saturn square. Mars was at 0 degrees 036 Libra, approximately, on August 6th, 1694. In fact, the Bank of England has just had its birthday, born on August the 6th. And so, but there's Mars square Saturn. And so you've got Mars opposition Saturn, Mars conjunct the Bank of England's Mars, Saturn opposition the Bank of England's Mars. And so this might say something about the economy, and the Bank of England is important because, for example, it sets interest rates. I believe that, I'm making this recording on today, Thursday. I believe that today, Thursday, the Bank of England reduced interest rates by 1/4 point. And it was a split decision. I think it was 5-4. 5 members of the committee or board supported the. Did I say? Sorry, the Bank of England lowered interest rates. Let me get that right. Economics isn't really my forte, but so the Bank of England lowered interest rates, and 5 members of the board voted to lower. 4 voted against, and so it was a very touch and go decision. And if you lower interest rates, well, that might encourage inflation, and there's already a growing inflation issue. So was it really the right thing to do? I think that given what's going on with the Bank of England, that it's got a Mars return, you've got Mars-Saturn opposition, maybe lowering interest rates might not have been such a good thing to do. Okay, lowering interest rates, logically, if I've got this right, would lower Britain's borrowing costs, but it could have an impact on inflation. And so the Bank of England, behind the scenes, there's probably sort of a lot going on there, and a few people impacted by the Mars-Saturn opposition. Some of these people I've already mentioned, but I'm now continuing on the theme of British politics. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, he has his Mercury at 1 degree 11 Libra, and he also has his. I don't have a time of birth for Sadiq Khan, and he is widely criticised by the right. If you go to YouTube, you can find just thousands of videos saying people saying how awful he is. And I mean, I'm not expressing an opinion here. I'm just looking at his chart, and sort of Mercury is about the way he's thinking, the way he's communicating, what how people are responding to it. And he's got Mercury conjunct true black moon Lilith. He's got Mars conjunct his Mercury, Saturn opposition his Mercury. Saturn opposition Mercury, it can be quite depressive and angry and annoyed. So I don't think he's feeling very happy at the moment with this Mars-Saturn opposition on his Mercury, sort of brooding, sort of deep thoughts about what he should be doing, and possibly being quite resentful. And another person who has got Mercury conjunct true black moon Lilith is, of course, Barack Obama. And Barack Obama's Mercury true black moon Lilith conjunction, well, that's not being hit by Mars and Saturn. It is being hit by an opposition to Pluto. But with Barack Obama, he's got his Venus at 1 degree 47 Cancer. So Venus is the planet of relationships. I don't know how he's getting on with his wife, Michelle, but that Mars-Saturn opposition is right on his Venus. And so that could indicate interpersonal problems, but it may not be about his marriage. It may be about something else, some other relationship, or it may be about just something connected with Venus. And additionally, one final politician to look at is the president of Argentina, who has his Mars at 1 degree 41 Libra. So Javier Milei has this Mars-Saturn opposition. He's got Mars on his Mars. He's got Saturn opposition his Mars. Mars is a planet of assertion, and he comes over as quite an assertive person. Mr. Chainsaw. That's his trademark chainsaw for cutting government departments, cutting government expenditure. The economy. I mean, he's done quite well on the surface. He's certainly got inflation down. And which, inflation has always been a problem in Argentina, but his actions have certainly had an impact there. Of course, a lot of people have lost their job, and a lot of people, I'm sure, in Argentina can't stand him. A lot of people love him, but a lot of people can't stand him. And so with Mars conjunct his Mars, Saturn opposition Mars, his enemies must be coming out of the woodwork, left, right and centre. And so he's really going to have to assert himself. But it could be quite frustrating having to get his program through, and there's going to be resistance at every step. I mean, another way of looking at it is to say, well, maybe he's under some kind of physical threat. I mean, probably not, but while this Mars-Saturn opposition is in force, probably a good idea to make sure, his security arrangements are all in order. We have to say that, don't I? I mean, I'm sure he's got a lot of enemies in Argentina. And I just wanted to finish with just a few people who have Mars-Saturn oppositions in their charts. I'm not saying that anything is going to be happening to them, but just perhaps to give an idea of what it's like to have Mars-Saturn opposition. There's someone who's starting to get quite a lot of attention is Yulia Tymoshenko. Do you remember her? If you remember the Orange Revolution was it the Orange Revolution in 2004 in Ukraine? And she's still, very much there. I think, she became, I get it mixed up. I think she was president of Ukraine, or was she prime minister? I think she was president of Ukraine for a bit, and she had for a time, or was it prime minister? But she was a very powerful figure, sort of 2004, 2005. She had her trademark sort of blonde hair locks. Her hair was sort of done in sort of circles, and that's what how you could sort of spot her. And she's not gone away, and I think she has recently suggested that Ukraine has becoming a colony of the West. I mean, she is a vocal opponent of Russia. She always has been, but she is questioning the direction of Ukraine and how it has become a virtual colony of the West, and how a lot of the structures of power in Ukraine are chosen by the West. And She does have Mars-Saturn opposition in her horoscope, and Mars-Saturn opposition can be quite grueling, quite grinding. And I think she did spend some time in prison. One of her sort of political opponents found a reason to put her into prison. I mean, I don't know the details. And she has Mars-Saturn opposition, but she hasn't gone away, and she is in some quarters being suggested as a replacement to Zelensky. I think that's a sort of a minority view, but you can see how Mars-Saturn opposition might work in her case. A very rich woman. She did very well. Did very well for herself. But yeah, life is a struggle. Life has been a struggle at times, and she maybe is putting herself in the firing line by making suggestions about the future of Ukraine. So that Mars-Saturn opposition does seem to be working out. And Mars-Saturn opposition can be about violence. You feel there's no alternative. Things are not good. Things aren't working well. You try to influence the system, perhaps through writing. Perhaps if you're a journalist, you don't like the way things are going. You write stuff, but people don't listen. And then what do? Well, you have no alternative. Well, you might think you've got no alternative. So you might feel that the only alternative is to change things with the barrel of a gun. And so Ulrike Meinhof of the Baader-Meinhof fame, the Baader-Meinhof gang was a group of sort of urban guerrillas / terrorists, depending on your view, in Germany, in West Germany, in sort of 1970s. And Ulrike Meinhof, she committed suicide in prison. Of course, some say she was murdered, but the established view is that she committed suicide, and she has had a Mars-Saturn opposition in her horoscope. She was a journalist. And she got involved with the Baader-Meinhof gang, and then particularly got involved with their leader, Andre Baader. And so that's Mars-Saturn. And of course, Mars-Saturn in a female chart, Mars would represent the kind of man she might want to get involved with. So she's got Mars opposition Saturn. So Mars in Leo, I know that Andrea Baader was not, he was a Taurus, it wasn't a Leo, but he had a sort of Leo kind of personality. He was kind of quite larger than life. He liked fast cars, even if they were stolen fast cars, but that's what he liked. And he did get arrested. I think one of the reasons he got arrested on one occasion was because he was driving too fast in a stolen car, because he just liked, those are the kind of cars he liked. So that might be Mars and Leo, that might represent Andrea Baader, and that's how another way in which Mars-Saturn opposition could work. And if you are in the UK, you might have heard, or you probably have heard, of Paula Yates. Paula Yates, she died. She was a television star, and she was on television a lot, and she was associated with Michael Hutchence. He hanged himself. So she has Mars opposition Saturn, and of course she was married to Bob Geldof, and there is her Mars opposition Saturn, a very close Mars-Saturn opposition. So Michael Hutchence, who she was associated with, who she had a child with, Michael Hutchence hanged himself, and then she, in the end, died through a heroin overdose. I don't quite know the circumstances of it, but so that might be a way about how Mars-Saturn opposition might have worked. There was also this question about who her father was. This was a sort of a mystery, and then it came out that there was this major TV personality called Huey Green, and it came out that he was the father. It wasn't the father everyone thought it was. It was someone else, and so that may also say something about Mars and Saturn in a female chart. Say something about the father. And who else? Oh, I'm running out of time here. Piers Morgan has a Mars-Saturn opposition. So one way in which a Mars-Saturn opposition can work, again, like Paula Yates, a very close Mars-Saturn opposition, Mars in Virgo opposition Saturn in Pisces, someone who is very verbal, is very attacking. He kind of likes the sound of his own voice. He's very aggressive. He comes over always being outraged and being angry. And so you could say that is a constructive use of that his Mars-Saturn opposition. It is linked with Uranus and Pluto. So he's got Uranus conjunct his Mars, Uranus opposition his Saturn, and sort of Pluto is sort of quite connected with that as well. And going back to a female chart, the film director Leni Riefenstahl, who had Mars opposition Saturn. So there's her Mars at 21 Cancer and Saturn at 22 Capricorn. So Leni Riefenstahl was sort of Hitler's favourite film director. She did The Triumph of the Will, and she did a film about the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And so Mars opposition Saturn might say something about her attraction to Hitler, her attraction to Nazi Germany, what she got associated with, and perhaps something about her reputation. And if you've got Mars-Saturn opposition, it's quite possible that what makes you famous is your death. And someone who is famous for his death is Georgy Markov. So Georgy Markov was a Bulgarian defector. He was a Bulgarian writer. He worked for the BBC, and the Bulgarians, I think it was the Bulgarians, on Westminster. I think he was on Westminster Bridge. He was, I think this was in the late 70s. He was attacked with an umbrella. And an umbrella was stuck into his leg, and this umbrella, it fired a little metal ball into his leg, which contained ricin, which is this sort of deadly poison derived from castor oil, and he died as a result of the poisoning. So really, Georgy Markov is famous for his death and the particular manner of his death. And yes, he has Mars opposition Saturn. And finally, if you've got Mars opposition Saturn, you can be quite tough, you can be quite brutal. And the former Albanian dictator Enver Hoxha was born on October the 16th, 1908. Don't have a time of birth for him, but Enver Hoxha had a Mars-Saturn opposition. Notice that Enver Hoxha has Sun in Libra. Sun in Libra. A lot of politicians have Sun in Libra, and a lot of politicians with dictatorial tendencies have Sun in Libra. If you've got Libra, if you've got Sun in Libra, it can work very well in politics. And a lot of people probably died because of Enver Hoxha. I mean, he was fairly brutal, and there are always stories about Albania. I mean, I don't know whether they're true, but for example, again, I don't know whether it's true. The story goes that under communism in Albania, there was some kind of cabinet meeting or something, and someone disagreed with the cabinet, and some politician, and he fell out and he got fired or something. And then it was reported later in the day that there was an earthquake in Albania, and only one person died, and that person who died was this same politician who had disagreed with the government just perhaps a few hours earlier. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that might be how sort of Mars-Saturn, a Mars-Saturn opposition might work. His enemies may get taken out pretty quickly, and he did have a reputation for being quite brutal. And of course, Albania. With Albania, I used to be quite obsessed with Albania. In the early 80s, it was everyone was so curious about Albania, and I remember there used to be a shop in Covent Garden area which in the early 80s, which totally specialised in communist Albania stuff. I don't know how the place kept going, and it was, and then you could listen to Radio Tirana on the radio on the World Service, and I remember in the early 80s I went to a CND rally, and then I came back that night and I listened to Radio Tirana, and Radio Tirana, which is sort of the voice of the Albanian Communist Party, was reporting on this CND rally, and it was saying how the British police had shot dead some demonstrators. And I mean, I wasn't aware of this. I mean, it's just amazing how the news got covered up. Anyway, I used to be quite obsessed with Albania, and that's a horoscope of Enver Hoxha, and he had a Mars-Saturn opposition. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.